The second Standard Bank Climate Summit under the theme Journey to Net Zero took place in Johannesburg this week. The event attracted thought leaders and decision makers in the climate space. I'm Warwick Peterson and we're bringing you a mini-series of interviews from the event. I'm now joined by Professor Maurice Mutambenim, Dean of Gibbs. Professor, good afternoon and thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Warwick. Thank you so much for having me.
Professor, what do you believe a just energy transition should look like across Africa's diverse context?
It's a transition from a current fossil fuel-driven economy to a clean energy economy, however, one that takes into consideration the unique demands of the African continent. On the one hand, it's an understanding that we provide the least emissions, greenhouse gas emissions in the world, but we carry the heaviest burden, which then means from a global perspective, it requires that we get charged in proportion to the harm that we are causing. And given that the rest of the continent only causes 4% of the harm in the world, the rest of the world needs to invest 96% of the bill to ensure that the rest of us are able to transition in a way that no one gets left behind, in a way that ensures that people that lose their jobs in fossil fuel economy are able to find appropriate employment in a clean energy environment.
Professor, let's speak about sustainable finance. How has the sustainable finance landscape changed over the last few years, and how do you see it moving forward?
So there's clearly a big interest in terms of the asset owners, the likes of pension funds, and the asset managers in the form of the pension fund managers and the asset financiers in the form of banks, who now understand that it's really important for them to play a role in funding this transition from a fossil fuel economy to a clean energy economy. So the awareness is there, but the path to that clean energy environment is not very clear. And so there's more work that needs to be done to ensure that we have appropriate path to that clean energy environment. As we speak today, the investment pool is certainly much bigger than it was 10, 15 years ago, but it's a fraction of what it ought to be in order for us to really have a significant impact in terms of ensuring that the projects that need to be funded are properly funded. So the kinds of changes that I believe are required are the asset owners taking a longer term view, the asset managers helping them to think about returns in a different way, returns beyond a return on investment in financial terms, but also a return in environment, a return in society. So we need to change the matrix that we're using to think about a sustainable return on investment that we are making for ourselves. Because as we know, we don't steal from the future, we borrow from the future.
My next guest is Ms. Nasmira Mula, and she's the Chief Sustainability Officer at 921. Nasmira, welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Warwick.
There's a lot of discussion as to whether investors should divest from carbon-intensive companies or should work towards solutions as an active shareholder. Can you elaborate on these approaches and what you think is most effective?
I think as the net zero movement, the commitments from asset owners and asset managers to support net zero have gained traction. There's been a lot of effort to try and figure out how to do this. And initially there was a thought that by divesting from these carbon intensive businesses, you starve them of capital and therefore reduce their business viability and therefore reduced the fossil fuel in the world. I think what we've realized is it's a lot more complex than that. Firstly is, especially given the rise in energy prices we're seeing, is somebody's going to own these businesses. There is going to be capital available. We've seen in the last week or so, Continental Resources in the US going private, saying to public markets, we don't need your money. And actually, for the carbon and the climate, that's probably the worst possible option. Because once it goes private, the ability of responsible shareholders to have an influence is gone. So we would rather stay invested, work with our high emitting companies and help them to transition.
Ms. Mira, let's speak about those opportunities. What opportunities rather exist for investors in clean energy across Africa?
There's a lot of opportunity at this point in time. So we're seeing a lot of the new power generation across Africa being built in the renewable and the green space. Countries like Uganda doing a lot in hydro, but we're seeing solar in Mozambique, solar in Mali. For the average investor, the risk return profile there comes across as a little bit scary. But what we're seeing is the returns have actually been quite solid. And I think closer to home in South Africa, there's a lot of interest in the renewable bill that is going to come, especially from corporates at this point in time.
Now, Ms. Mira, you're 91's first Chief Sustainability Officer. Talk to us about your role and why this type of role is required in businesses today.
Well, I think the integration of sustainability across investment portfolios is something that started over a decade ago but has become increasingly a focus area. So why the creation of this role is to highlight the importance of it at this point in time. The bulk of this role is focused on investments, and what that means is effectively two things. One is supporting the integration of ESG into existing strategies, and the second is supporting the development of new strategies that invest behind our key advocacy positions, like the need to support the transition in emerging markets.
And how is the shift towards sustainability affecting investment strategies globally, and how do you see this evolving?
So I think the first step has been very much about integration. And the way we approach it is assessing and pricing the externalities. It's not about saying we don't invest in certain things or imposing our moral values on a portfolio. After all, the average investor has given us their money and asked us to provide a return to them. So it's about us better integrating the E, S, and the G externalities into our portfolios. The second part of it is where we have investors who also want us to have promote certain factors, have an environmental benefit or potentially a social benefit, there is a growing need to develop strategies that provide both the financial return and the impact return. But that's for the subset of investors who specifically want that.
And finally, let me welcome Ms. Berenice Francis, and she's the Executive Corporate Affairs, Risk and Sustainability at Motus. Berenice, welcome.
No, thank you.
How are you leveraging partnerships to access finance and gain insights into Africa's social, economic, and regulatory landscape?
So I think ultimately no organization operates in a silo or in a vacuum. What we need to ensure is that we match what our stakeholder expectations are and which of our stakeholders become more than just interested in investing in us, but actually become partners in leveraging our capabilities. So as an automotive group, we obviously have a very specific capability and access to resources. And what we've done over time is we've built partnerships either through the value chain with our supply chain partners, with social partners, as well as our investment, our providers of capital, to ensure that we can come up with solutions that make sense and that are more sustainable, so that ultimately we all participate in the broader value chain and interest.
Berenice, earlier this year, you announced a 6.8 billion ESG funding package with Standard Bank. Tell us more about this and Motus' sustainability journey.
So our journey obviously started a while ago, where we started putting in very specific targets with regards to our environmental impact. And over time, we've incorporated that in terms of our ESG journey. So we were very pleased when we were able to, through the help of Standard Bank, who facilitated the 6.8 billion facility, we were very pleased that we could mark the milestone in acknowledging where we've come, and then further entrench our commitment to rebuilding KPIs that we're now incorporate in all of our different executives, performance and incentives. So I think the ability of partners like Standard Bank to be able to facilitate quite a milestone like this and to be able to put something together like this really does recommit their views with regards to sustainability, and it also further entrenches the need for organizations to be on a sustainable journey and then have clear impacts and clear KPIs in terms of how it makes a difference in terms of the environment in which they operate.
Is the automotive sector preparing for heavier government regulations with regards to emissions?
So it's twofold.
Yeah.
So most of the automotive manufacturers, obviously they're multinational, so they've already experienced increased legislation and increased pressure from governments with regards to emissions. So for example, our European businesses already have very specific or set targets with regards to carbon reduction. That will soon follow, I believe, in the South African market. At the moment, obviously, we kind of limited from a carbon emissions perspective where we pay taxes on that. But as we mature and as we understand our responsibility to contribute to transitioning, I think we'll see more and more pressure in all industries. I think the automotive industry is already party to it, and we're expecting a more, how can I say, partnership with regards to taxes on that.
And that brings us to the end of our coverage of the Standard Bank Climate Summit on the theme Journey to Net Zero. I trust you've enjoyed your time with us, talking all things climate change and just transitioning. Until next time, it's goodbye from us.